What I like to do in these is just understand what someone does and really their journey of what led them to it. You're slightly different in that you're in between jobs. I know you do coaching. Is that something that you offer? Actually, rather than me reading into my assumptions of your post, let's start with if you explain who you are, what you do.
It's a wonderful question, Rob. And I love that you tried very hard at first because it gives me the sense that, yes, it's sometimes difficult for people out there to understand. And I think it comes back from this concept of portfolio career. That is something new, that is something that is still developing. Human or mankind has been for many years overly developing into niches, right? To the point that even this platform that we use to connect to each other supports even for this over specialization. The more you niche down, the more you get into something very specific, the more rewards you get. And work has been like that for so many years, since Ford, right? And okay, you specialize in your little piece and that's what you do and that's how you're going to get the best results. My background is technology. I started in infrastructure in technology. So I was the guy that would work on the servers, even the cables and stuff like that. And I migrated into software development. And Rob, back then, 20 little bit years ago, let's not get into the dirty details. Software development was you do everything. I would install the operating system. I would install the databases, the applications that run on top. I would do the coding. I would program the databases. I would transport it from server to server. You would do absolutely everything. And even in that profession, what happened was over specialization, right? Nowadays, you hire front-end developer, what they call, that will just design the interface for you, just the screen, to make it beautiful, to make it useful, to make it accessible, and so on. Then you have the backend developer that is going to do the more intricate stuff. Then you're going to have a DBA, a database administrator, that is going to coordinate that. Then your DevOps engineer that is going to make sure that the systems go to the production systems and all that. And what I'm doing with my career now, getting back to your question, is almost the opposite. I am spreading myself across. So I'm still corporate animal. So I'm still to the point of the transitional jobs, looking forward and working on getting a new position in corporate, in technology leadership roles. But that's happening at the same time that I am developing my coaching. Yes, you're right. I do offer coaching services and I have my clients. I have had my clients ever since a few years now. And it started back when I was in a corporate position, right? That's how I got interested into coaching. But even that's not the end of the story because I'm also authoring books. That's also not the end of the story because you know about my contributions in LinkedIn. And that's not the end of the story because I'm also having a small partnership for doing some app development, a little bit on the entrepreneurial side of the things. And I see the future of work a little bit like that and the future of mankind a little bit like that. People are going to discover more and more that they have more than one talent, that they are interested by more than one thing. And that is nothing wrong in pursuing a few of them at the same time. It's actually making people way more interesting. How to explain that? Sometimes cumbersome. In a platform like LinkedIn, absolutely impossible. But that's why I value so much this kind of opportunities, getting back and together with people and having conversations and then explaining.
That's interesting because I've followed you for quite a while now, over a year. And I didn't know about you developing apps. You're writing books. So that interests
me.
You
didn't, right? You may be bringing this a little bit more to the open, but it's not something that I talk too often about, no.
I think you're a bit like me, that you have lots of interests and I'm not very disciplined in. I should just really, I know, talk about relationships, talk about conflict and talk about trust and teams and this kind of thing. I'm not that person. I can't sit down and go, okay, I'm going to do I have an idea and I want to share it. And I think you're quite similar in that. But where that becomes a problem is it's hard to pigeonhole someone, whereas certain people you can go, okay, this person, they do this, they do that. There's no doubt about it. But it takes a lot of discipline to do that. And I think you're similar to me, that we have too much that we see something, we want to talk about that and develop that idea.
Absolutely, it resonates with me, Rob. I just listed the things that I feel like I'm having real progress with. I could list another 10 or 20 things that I'm also very interested about and pursue in a certain degree or the other. And it does make it a little harder for us because, of course, we have only so much attention to give and distribute to other people. I have, though, learned over time that it has its benefits. You don't need to be known by everybody for just the one thing. Eventually, if you're just connecting around themes and topics and interests, instead of connecting just with people, it will naturally fall. The people that I really care about, that they understand I have a corporate career, that I have this leadership aspirations and so on, namely executives, hiring managers, recruiters, and so on, they know me for that. Even if they get sometimes a little confused, hey, but you're still doing the coaching thing, that's okay. They still know what is important for them to know about me and how I can help them. Same thing with my coaching clients. Every now and then I'm having this coaching conversations and people address all sort of topics. You probably know that. And then somebody comes out with, okay, I'm having, this actually happened not too long ago. Somebody came up with a topic around SNOP meetings. That's sales and operation planning meetings. And that's a concept that comes from supply chain management, which is something that I have studied and I used extensively in my latest corporate job. And then as she was getting into it and she noticed that I actually understood what she was talking about without she having to explain it to me, she was really puzzled. How do you know about that? I'm struggling to implement this and I don't know what is the value. Yeah, we can talk about it because this is part of what I'm doing. Oh, this job and that job. Wow, you did all these things. Yes, she was my client and she was still very surprised to know that I had such a background. Again, it was not important for her, at least up to that point, to know that I had that background. What was important to her was that she knew I was a coach and the kind of coach that I can deliver and the kind of difference I can make. And I think you continue in the spin, you're going to find in your life, you're always connecting with the people around the teams, around the topics that are of mutual interest. And that's enough.
Also, the other side of that is that the more interest that you have, the more cross-pollination. And so that helps you be better at different things. Although they may seem different on the surface, there's a lot of commonalities and interrelationships, and you can transfer them from one field to another.
Absolutely. On the example of supply chain management, right? I have been working with technology for many years. And one of the things that are core to technology is to understand systems. And systems are extremely easy, right? You have inputs, you have process, you have outputs. It's not harder than that. And as I started studying supply chain management, what do you think I found? A big system. It's the same thing. You have a lot of inputs, you have a lot of processing rules and everything, but it's processing. It's not that complicated to understand. And you have outputs. And once you just, and you can do this at several levels. When you get into process, for example, you can understand things like dependencies, bottlenecks, and the sort in the same way that you understand it in the context of software development. And people would say, what technology is something else? No, everything in life is connected in some way. How? That's up to us to learn, to discover, to exercise. And I think this is actually the value that human beings bring. That's the one thing that artificial intelligence cannot, at least not as of yet, bring to the table.
So you began work in tech. What led you to that? So maybe what were your influences as a child and what led from childhood to going into tech?
That's probably a very common story. It was my parents, or most specifically my father. When I was 7, 8, he decided to give up his banking job and start a business firm himself with a few partners. And guess what? He decided to start with tech. I have seen my father working with it for a little bit of time. And back then in Brazil, we are talking about 30 years ago now, it was really not common for anybody to have access to computers. Most probably, I wouldn't have for many years still if it was not for the job of my father, the kind of work that he was doing. And that was fascinating. I think it was the aspect of the mystery, of the novelty, of being something that people still didn't know how to deal with and so on. And as a child, I started where pretty much every child would start with computers, with games. As I was 12, then there was a lot happening in the family. My parents are divorced. And then my father actually found it would be a good idea to get closer to me, to have an opportunity to be closer to me if I would work with him for some time. So I started splitting my days. Mornings, I would work with him. Afternoons, I would go to school. And at first, work with him meant I would do office chores, right? I would run to the bank. I would deliver some notes. I would do even some cleaning if that was necessary. But there was always some time available. And I started reading the books that were around there. That's, by the way, how I started learning English as well, because you couldn't access any technical books in Portuguese back then. And I started playing with something called Lotus 123. I don't know if you remember what that thing is.
One of the original spreadsheet.
That's the Excel of the past, right? And I started doing some cool stuff for him that he didn't thought was possible, because again, even he didn't know. He was more into reselling the computers and stuff like that, more working at the hardware level. And I got more and more fascinated with the possibilities. We are now in 2020 and we are talking about automation. Automation for me started years ago.
One thing you mentioned is that you worked with your dad in the morning. Was this like really early, or do you not have school in the mornings?
No, in Brazil, there was completely different system. And I realized that now that I have lived in the US and here in Europe. The school, I was in public school. It was only 4 and something hours per day. And you had a choice. You could do it in the morning. You could do it in the afternoon. And if you have two things, either if you had the need or if you would have repeated too many years, then you could do it at night, because that probably meant you needed to work, even at earlier ages. So I decided, because I was never a morning person, to do it in the afternoon. So I was doing my primary school and secondary school throughout the time in the afternoon. It usually started like at 2 and something in the afternoon, which meant that at the age of 12, I could then go to my father's to work in the morning. And then after I would have lunch and then go straight to school.
That's a much better system. I wish we had that.
No, it was not a good system. I could tell you horror stories about it, how the classes were. And even in these few hours that we were supposed to be in the school, mostly we didn't have the teachers. Public school has been failed, and it's a failure in Brazil for many years now.
What I remember from Brazil when I was younger, I remember you had such inflation that the money that you would get in the morning this is the reports that we were reading, the money you would get in the morning, you wouldn't be able to buy enough stuff because the inflation was so crazy at that time.
Yeah, that's the early 90s. We managed to get more than 100% inflation a month. And it's funny, I was talking to some friends about it the other day. Here living in Switzerland, the habits are very different compared to Brazil. And one of those habits is grocery shopping. And the thing is, I noticed they go much often to the groceries to get whatever they need to get, sometimes even 3-4 times a week, or coming back from work, stop quickly. And in Brazil, this inflation thing was so strong that it has built culture, a habit in us, that we would go to the supermarket once a month, load the shopping cart to the point it blows up, and take everything home and store, which meant that the refrigerator had to be huge. We needed freezers. We needed a lot of space because of how afraid people were regarding inflation. So whenever people ask me, can you build habit? Can you change culture? Yes, you can. Just make it hard enough that you're going to see that it changes.
That must have been some interesting times to be growing up then.
Luckily for me, in a way, I was still maybe too small to understand all that to the level that I understood it later. The worst years, I was like 10. So it was a little bit before I started working. From the point that I started working and onwards, we had better economical plans. We had a little bit better structure. The current currency that is in Brazil is the same ever since 1994, which is a record for the country, by the way. Before that, we had a new currency every 2, 3 years, which is absolutely nuts and also explains the inflation and all. So things changed for the better in that sense, for the much better.
It sounds idyllic growing up in, I suppose, if you're in the right part of Brazil. But I just imagine beach, sunshine, relaxed football. Was that how it was for you?
It was. But let me add here, big disclaimer. Brazil is a huge country and you have a lot of inland where people would never, ever get near the beach. So you may cross paths with Brazilians that would tell you, no, I never did that. And that would be absolutely normal. But lucky me, I had family. So São Paulo is a big state in Brazil. And the capital city, it's where I come from, São Paulo as well. It's one of the biggest cities in the world. It has been like that for the last 40 years. It's around 25 million people, so really huge. And that means that you have, in a way, access, as long as you can grab some money, to many experiences, different things that you can do. And on top of that, there is a coast nearby. So in 1 hour, you can be there, and a lot of people will just go over the weekend for the day and then come back. Again, lucky me, my father's family comes from the beach, and my grandmother lived there for many years. And I would spend part of my vacation there, also the weekends. As a grower, when I was just leaving university, I actually got a job there, and I spent a couple of years living with her and running on the beach, by the beach, pretty much every day, every morning. Yeah, the entirety of the year, because you basically don't get many cold days or rainy days or anything like that. It was marvelous.
See, I live 20 minutes from the beach. Most days you wouldn't want to go there. Our clocks change in summer and winter. And in winter at 4 o'clock, it's dark. So when you were talking about going to school, yeah, from December, so like late November till January, pretty much by 4 o'clock it's dark. So if you were going to school at 2 o'clock, yeah.
That's tough. How did you manage that?
We're lucky here. We have a lot of things. We have a lot of stability. The infrastructure is good. The health services is relatively good, but we don't have weather, but we have stability. And it's good for growth.
True.
So yeah, there's pluses and minuses.
I always tell my Swiss friends here that I know why God didn't give them a beach. It's because things are so perfect here, then it would create hell. You would have everything. Why would you go anywhere else? So it's that kind of thing.
When I think of Brazil, one of the things, it's the beach, it's the football. But when you look at a lot of some of the greatest footballers, Ronaldinho, they never really achieved their talent in the same way that someone like Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, because the party lifestyle was too strong.
The professionalism. Yeah. I think it's something that's changing, though. I know you like football, so it's also something we can talk about. I am a big supporter of Palmeiras in Brazil. And there are a few players that are coming through. One of them is coming to Real Madrid this summer, Hendrick. And you can see that things changed with that boy. And follow the team. I follow all levels. So I can tell you that it's not only that boy, that it's more systematic now. They are getting very professional. That is a work that is done with the boy. That is work that is done with the family. That is a lot of work that is done in the transition between every level on the teams. A lot of care to what kind of behavior is expected, what they should and should not do, and how they can actually achieve higher levels. And I was just listening to an interview by the boy. He's extremely professional, very mature, to a point that you'd say, what happened? They really changed the country. So I think there is awakening. The thing we can never forget about Brazil is that Brazil is still a very young country in so many ways, right? That the culture, whatever people call Brazilian culture, is, according to many historians, still developing, because it was a big mix of Europeans with Africans, with Indians as well, to a lesser degree. And all that took a lot of time to adjust. It was not, for example, like in the US, that started with one specific culture and then later on started embracing other cultures. Brazil has always had a very strong mix and a large mix across the country. So we are maybe sometimes running a little bit behind. But I do have this feeling that the country is progressing over time. And we see that in football as well. So the technique, the abilities, the skills have always been there. And probably because the boy was playing football the whole day. And that's what everybody does. But I see that now that is awareness. It's raising the awareness of the kids, of the parents, of the clubs, of the structure in society, that if we don't take it more serious, then things are not going to work that well. Because of the examples you have mentioned, Rob, fantastic football players that got nowhere, but also because of the national team. That is huge pressure over there. Why is that the team is not ever winning the World Cup again? And why is that it's collecting some significantly negative results against even in expressive national teams in the world scene? And then things really are supposed to change, and I trust they are going to change.
No, I remember coming from England, which is a team which has had many great players, and apart from like 1966, they've never been able to make the national team work. But I remember my earliest memories, there was magic about Brazil, with the Zico, Socrates. When those players played, football was different. There was just this swagger and there was a beauty to it that no other country had. And so I think particularly people who were around then they see Brazil as a different type of footballing country.
And I think that's an extremely good example on abilities, on closing gaps, on performance, because you can have, like the Brazilian players have all this ability. What did mostly the Europeans did to close the gap? They put in the effort. They did a lot of put science to work. Physiology here in Europe works on a completely different level. You have different training structures. You have much better organized tournaments. I am always surprised here in Switzerland with the level of organization they have even for young kids. In every village, doesn't matter if it's 3, 10, 15,000 people, you're going to have a football team. This football team is going to be organized, having a field to train and coaches to train them, and etc. It's part of the community life. And then it always raised my own question. Okay, is Brazil the country of football, or is this place here? Look at how much more serious they treat the thing, right? Just to say that you can close gaps in terms of abilities if you're aiming for higher performance, to science, to data, to discipline, to organization. And then the task of those who are skilled, who have these higher abilities, is to catch up with that.
Yeah, I think an example of that is Germany. Germany, traditionally, whatever the players they've had, they've always just been there in terms of World Cups. And yeah, they often won without having the greatest players, but just through that organization.
Yeah, that's how you can make things work. And you see the results. It's undisputable. You see when Spain decided to organize themselves, what happened? They also got their World Cup.
Yeah, which I often think is an analogy for England, because we had what we call the golden generation with so many individual talents, and yet no one could get them to work. And Spain, I think, were like that for many years. Great individual players, but they never performed as a nation. But then that all comes down to, like you say, the organization and being able to make them as a team.
And for that, how important is the role of what we would call the leader, the coach? As I was younger and following football, there was some praise to the coach, to the role of the coach and the importance for the tactics and etc. But not like right now. People understand that much better, that it's not only about organizing 11 guys in a field and telling them to do this or that, but it's managing the other 11 that eventually don't play. It's organizing the interpersonal relationships, the dynamics, understanding that. It's managing the peaks and valleys of each player and matching that. It's understanding the opponent. That's a big piece of what the coach does to adjust the text, the technique, keeping that flexibility within themselves and then spreading that to the team so it's not too rigid and the opponent would not be able to read you that easily, that knows that you're always going to do this, going to do the same thing. So I feel the role of the coach also has a much higher stand right now, understandably, and we could translate that back into corporate just as the same. Where you see the best coaches, you're going to see the best results.
Okay, now when you went into tech, what was that journey? From working on like the actual tech how did you develop into software and then the other areas that you've moved into?
Accident. My life is full of lucky accidents that I treasure them so much. I was in the university. So what happened was I worked with my father. Then I stopped for a year, went to a small school to teach informatics when I was 15, stayed there till right before the uni. And then in Brazil, we have a national exam that you do in order to get a position in the uni. I wanted 6 months to study for that because it's really tough exam. Then I entered and I got back to work with my father for a year or so. At that point in time, I was already a Microsoft certified specialist and things like that, working really hard on, again, the infrastructure side of the things, servers, operating systems, and so on. And one day a guy called me from this company in Santos and said, I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to run an interview. If you would come, it would be nice. Okay. I have nothing to lose. My grandmother is there. I can pay her a visit. Fine. Went to talk to him. He was really impressed with my technical certifications and how early I was in the career and so on. And he offered me a job, and the job was to be a software developer. I don't know. I really only did that in the university and only at student level, right? I can probably learn that, but just letting you know that I never did this before. That's fine. I think you are going to do fine. And anyways, I'm going to negotiate the salary accordingly. So it's distributed risks. Okay, fine. I took it. And within 3 months, I was performing at the highest level. It was so natural to me. And I feel it's like that in life. When you get into the things that you're naturally good at, it just flows. The things I'm naturally bad at, it's equally easy to see and understand. Yeah, I suck. I'm not born to do that. When I got into that thing, it was like heaven for me. I love languages. That's why I've learned English from earlier on, then Spanish, now later on German, a little bit of French, and so on. And for the people that sometimes struggle with computers, let me just say, programming is pretty much like learning a new language that is spoken by the machine. It's not harder than that. Once you understand how the machine likes to be talked to, what are the expressions, what kind of sentences you use, what kind of words, and it's much simpler than any other language that I know, then it's really easy. And then it's more about solving problems, which is something that I love. Okay, I need to get from this point to this point. What can I use? What is the strategy? And so on. And yeah, that was pretty much the transition. Lucky interview out of the blue, not applying for positions or whatever, and then just getting into the technology. Then I need to say it was probably also luck that I was joining a team of wonderful people. Really wonderful people. They were very good software developers and they could have mistreated me or diminished me or not paid attention or just left me on the side. This guy doesn't know what he's doing here. But instead embraced me. They really supported me. They shared whatever knowledge they had. They shared examples, code snippets, books, whatever. And in no time I could keep up with them and work together with them. And in 6 months, I was leading the team there. And even that transition was so smooth. I know a lot of people worry about leading peers or even leading their previous bosses. And my experience was so positive over there that I have to say big thanks to them. Maybe they are going to hear this and they deserve it.
Let's talk about that. Moving from a programmer to a leader. When you say that was smooth, when you say that it's natural and this comes naturally, to me, that means that there's a through line, a theme throughout your life. And you've been able to transfer those talents. So when you talk about languaging and the problem solving, that to me says empathy and problem solving. Can you speak to what you found natural about that jump to leadership?
Ooh, great question, Rob. What was natural in that jump? I think it gets back to college. Really, now I'm just thinking about it. I think it's the first time somebody asked me exactly this question. I was an introvert as a young boy, very introvert. And the typical nerd, as some would call, high grades, a good student, but quite kept to himself. Some people nowadays would say bullied. I wouldn't label it like that, but it was rough sometimes. And it was not like I was taking any kind of leadership position in school or with the friends, anything like that. I cannot pinpoint exactly what happened, but the moment I started college, I just felt different. And one of the things that happened then is that I started organizing events. I started organizing the group work. I started organizing class activities. I was the one taking the responsibility to do the presentations, the oral presentations. But I didn't stop there. I started teasing the entire class to participate in the discussions. It was like really lively discussions. Some people even hated me for that, for bringing that up and making them stressed. But it was such a great experience that I felt this is what I need to do. This is where I belong. When I see these people doing so much while having fun, while developing, while it's the kind of environment I want to build. It's the kind of experience I want others to have. And if I can be in a position to do that, that's what I'm going to do. And if I have any opportunity to enable, that's what I'm going to do. So when I moved from the company of my father, when I was an individual contributor, we would call. And that's because the company was very small. It's 3-4 people. Every person just do the job. Into a company where there was a team, I just felt natural to start taking some responsibilities that were not software development related, that were more related to taking care of the team. I just felt naturally good with that, to represent them, to support them, to fight for them, to defend them, to bring their results to management, to bring them closer to the customers, and all these things. It just felt right.
So what I get a grasp on is you had very solid foundations on what you were doing. Like you studied, you knew what you were doing, you were good at that, you developed your social network, and you increasingly took on more and more responsibilities. You took initiative. So what it seems to me is if you imagine a circle, and if you imagine you keep going out of your comfort zone, you just keep expanding that. Now it makes perfect sense why you do so many different things, because you've started from this core of a very clear idea of who you are and expanded out so that who you are now has many different aspects because you've become a bigger circle. What also comes to mind is I know that you're a fan of spiral dynamics.
I am. Yes.
I really like the idea of spiral dynamics. I really like the way that it explains how, because I see this, that we moved from when I was growing up, things were very much, you do as you're told, authoritarian and centralized. And now it's become, you look at Gen Z, it's very much of power to the kids, power to everyone. And so through these polarities, spiral dynamics creates, so it's like a more conservative sense. It's like the blue one is conservative, and then it becomes very liberal. Yeah, which is like the 80s of everyone for themselves, and then it goes back and it bounces. So where I'm looking at, as you've expanded, now you're a very positive person. I can tell that you're not a complainer, but I'm guessing there must have been challenges. There must have been setbacks, because what it seems like too easy. Seems too perfect that you would just grow exponentially. So was it that it just grew out? Or was it a spiral where you each time had a setback, which then led you to the next level? Which analogy would fit best with your growth?
Yeah, I love the spiral dynamics, Rob, because first of all, it reminds us that we are not fixed. One thing that a lot of people don't understand on the spiral is that you can spiral up, or you can as well spiral. And it's not up in the sense of better and down in the sense of worse. It's a lot influenced by the context, by what's happening and what are the triggers, right? And adapting to the situations and making the changes, again, in whatever direction, is always going to mean there is some rupture, right? I'm not a complainer. You're right. But I probably gave you some hint very early on. My parents are divorced, and the divorce was terrible in pretty much every sense. It left a lot of unsolved things that I had to solve later on as a young adult. For example, the whole process of becoming an expat, going out of my comfort zone from Brazil to the US, even if that was one of my dreams, had a lot of fractures. One of them, again, getting back to the family team, it was a big rupture with my father that I had to work on later on again. And even the theme of coming to Switzerland was not an easy thing at all. Think about it. I was my dream place to live back then. I was happy and I had everything that I could possibly want. I didn't want to come. It required a lot of convincing and for me, a lot of letting go and changing deeply rooted ideas that I had about life, about human beings, about culture, and so on, that I had to change in the process. So, no, it was not easy. I tell this tale in Brazil. It's very normal that middle class young boys would get their cars whenever they are 18 or 19. Stuff like that. My younger brother got his car and started driving around. Back then, there was a lot of pressure for a boy of middle class to have this kind of stuff. And I made my own decisions that no, I wouldn't do that. My path was different. My priorities were different, and I would commit to that. I had my first car when I was 27, and a lot of people didn't really understand. Okay, he's putting all the work, the effort, and where are the results? And this kind of stuff is very heavy because I could feel the pressure that was again coming from society, from family, from friends, and whatnot. And you had to deal with this shit if you want to get somewhere. Not complaining. I never complained that I didn't have a car, that I was robbed in the bus stop because of that I would take 2 hours to get to college when other people would take 30 minutes. And you just carry on. You decide your strategy for life, you commit to it and go. And when it's time to change, then you need to realize it's time to change and go again. That's it.
Okay. Yes. So where I'm looking now is it's more like it's not a spiral. It's more like an upside down funnel, that you had a very strong core and you have something that makes you able to push yourself out of your comfort zone and to grow. And maybe it was the difficult experiences. You talked about your parents, but also about how school might have been challenging. And maybe it's those difficult experiences that you resolved early on, which give you the foundation so that you're able to grow from then on.
I think that one of the reasons was that I had difficulties. If I hadn't had any difficulty, then maybe I wouldn't have got anywhere. But I was growing up in an environment that was showing itself very limiting, that I couldn't do or reach or achieve this or that or the other thing. Traveling abroad was like a big no-go for me as a kid. Can you imagine that? So I would never have dreamed about it. For a short period of time, we were not hungry, but we were struggling to get food at home. And I think these experiences helped me shaping up this idea that I know what I want, and then that I am capable enough as a human being to develop a strategy to get what I want. And then being flexible enough, right? That's where the spiral comes in. And I only learned this much later, but without knowing it, that's what I have been using pretty much my entire life.
So that's where you've come from. Now, when you look ahead, what is it that you want? What's the things that drive you, or maybe what did drive you and what drives you now?
One thing I hope came already across quite loudly is the enablement of other human beings. So I want to play an active role in developing people, in making sure that others are having the opportunities that I had, that they are having the developments that they need, want, or aspire. I'm making a difference in their lives. I think, especially with my kids, as they are growing up, and I see I'm making that difference there, for the good and for the bad, because we all fail. I got a huge reinforcement that this is my role in the world, that I am here to serve others, to help others, to enable others, and that I need to be in positions where I can actually make that difference. So that's definitely one thing that I continue to look forward to. And that's why I have this at least dual role in the corporate on one side and coaching on the other, because you can also interchange a lot between the two, and I can feel like I'm fulfilling my mission very easily. I just mentioned, Rob, my family is my treasure. So I definitely want to make sure that I'm here for them, that I'm supporting them through their development, and hopefully that I'm given a number of years to watch them, what they do with their lives after that. I'm very curious about, I would love to see, just watch how it blooms for them. And the other thing that I'm resolving and I'm working on right now is again settling in this country, in Switzerland. That was a complete 80 degrees change for us. And yes, required some time. And now over the last 2-3 years already, I'm feeling really deeply like home. And we take even further steps in order to settle here and making this country our country.
So making a difference, I'm trying to hone in on why making a difference. What is it about? What is the why that powers you? It's making a difference in others. And how does that make you feel?
That makes me feel extremely good. I have read this somewhere. It's the most egoistic thing that a human being can do is to help others. Because
the most
egoistic thing that you can do is help others. Because when you help others, you feel fantastic. It's the best feeling you can really experience in this planet. The joy of giving, the joy of taking somebody by the hand and seeing after a year, two, how that person has grown, has been promoted, has reached goals, and etc. Nothing compares to that. I was talking to one of my coaches this afternoon, and we were talking about LinkedIn experiences a little bit. One experience that I have, and you probably had that too, is somebody reaches out and thank you for a difference that you made in their life because of piece of content, advice, something you recommended, whatnot. And this happens, at least here around, it happens live. People actually stop me every now and then in parks to say, thank you. I'm following you. And what you said this day really helped me. I was having this problem, that problem. And every time that happens, I feel like fulfilled. That is no other word. Fulfilled. Like I'm whole, like I'm part, I belong here, and I'm making a difference.
I think we all want to contribute. So for me, when I work with someone, it's about giving them freedom. So I see a lot of people tied up in relationships. I started way back, it was a problem of people not sticking to the gym, and then it became happiness, and then it became relationships, and then it became conflict, then it became teams. But for me, it's because I see a lot of people who I feel trapped, and particularly most bad relationships are because people don't know they can have better. People get together with someone for a vague reason, doesn't really make sense. The relationship doesn't work out because of that, and they're trapped because they don't know any different. So the thing I wish through my work is to set people free. I understand the fulfillment because I think everything for most of us comes through other people. So what if you could give them one quality, what would that be? Through your coach?
The sense of progress. So I really love to see that they achieved something that was important for them. I had this discussion once. What if it's the wrong thing? I would rather get them getting the wrong things for a little bit, for them to realize by themselves that these are the wrong things, and then they can shift and start working on the right things, than leave them there struggling. To your point, I don't want to fix anybody. I want people to live their lives in whatever shape, form, color that they want to live. And I believe in every single human being as a potential. I believe it's there. They're set to do, truly set to do. They are going to do, they are going to achieve. We need to bake in time. We need to bake in effort, discipline, and all those things, but it's completely doable. And the way that they understand that is in progress. So for me, progress is what nails it, and progress according to their terms, not my terms.
That kind of fits with that idea of growing out. I like to be able to tie things up so I can see how the congruence of someone.
You do a great job, Rob, I must say. But I knew about it because I saw the other interviews before.
We covered the coaching, the books that you're writing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'm interested in, because one of the questions I would ask is, if you were going to give a TED talk, what would it be on? But the other aspect of that is, if you're going to write a book, what is the book on?
Let me tell you out loud. So I actually wrote 2 books, and I am seriously considering to publish one of them. The first book that I wrote, which is, by the way, this one, is my personal take on the wheel of life. You know the concept, right? You have these different angles and then how you can work to integrate them. And basically what I do in that book, I focused on the elements of the wheel of life where I feel I can most contribute to in terms of experiences and tools and practices to others. And that was a book that I wrote thinking about my kids. So I wanted to make sure that regardless of what happens over the next many years, they would have a reference about that, because that's probably the number one tool that I used throughout my entire life, ever since I was 16 or 17. When I got acquainted with that tool, I started using it, and it really made a difference in my life. I'm thinking about objectives, not from one angle, but from all of them. And when I think about purpose, that came much later, it was really easy to find it because of the congruence of the elements in my wheel of life. So that's why I decided to write about it. It's a little bit of memories in a sense, because I talk about personal experiences, a little bit of practices, a little bit of jokes and funny stories that I share, again, with the first intent to give a little bit of a gift to my kids. And then why not to distribute that to the world? Then the second one I wrote, that's one I won't publish. But yeah, I will leave it here for, again, maybe my kids to read at some point in time. When I found out that I was about to be laid off, I thought about many things. And one of the things I thought was, hey, this is a great opportunity to test this idea. How would it look like if I would write a journal about that journey? And that's what I did. So it's 100,000 words or something like that over more than a year, telling the story from the perspective of how I was feeling on each of the days, depending on what was happening with announcements, with how I saw the colleagues, with how I felt about it myself. And which means that it's quite unfiltered, quite raw, which means that some people would get probably very sensitive about some of the things that I wrote, and that is no need for that, right? So that's why I decided not to publish it, to keep it as memories of mine. I love what I wrote, to be honest. I think there's some gold there, and the one thing I can do is just recommend people to journal about pretty much anything that they want to journal in their lives, but especially if they are going through a situation like that. It's such a powerful tool, help me greatly going through the experience. And so that was the second one. And now I started another one, which is still bare bones idea. Now it's a little bit more on the field of fiction, but interluded with business administration. So I'm talking about leadership using an animal story to illustrate some of what happens.
You're even more prolific than I thought.
I've told you. And I will not even tell you the ideas I already noted down to write next. It's all over the place.
Okay. And the apps you're developing?
So that's something I had an idea because of my coaching practice. I noticed that is a little bit of a gap on how coaches are getting trained, getting certified around the world. And this is still on a hypothesis, so I'm not going to share much details, but that's the problem I'm trying to solve. So I'm thinking about my fellow coaches and their struggles as they start in the career and how I could help.
Before we go into that, so who would be the ideal kind of person that could go on a growth journey with your coaching? What would they be looking for? And like what end result, what situation might they be in? What end result might they want? And in what way could you help their journey?
Most of the people that have significant results with me, they come from senior management positions. So they already sorted out a lot of stuff for themselves and already realized that it's time for them to stand up as leaders. So they are trying to change their practices, change some of their behaviors in order to change managing groups to leading teams. That's what most people have benefited working with me. Usually they are having some very clear goals for themselves, though sometimes they are not. And one of the things that I do is I help them finding different alternatives to get to those goals and keeping the accountability in order to get there.
That's quite clear. And in terms of what's next for you in terms of corporate, what are you looking for from your next position, and what where do you see that going?
That's a great question. One of the things that I am making a point again is that it's a leadership position where I have responsibility for the development of the talents. That's part of the job for me. Otherwise, it's not really interesting. And because of everything I told you about my technology background, that's what I want to play, right? So you can decide, okay, I want to focus on people. I am a people manager, but what is the scope? And for me, the scope is technology, especially with all these digital transformations happening across the globe, across companies of all sorts of sizes. That's where I feel I belong. Hopefully, this next job, this next opportunity I'm going to take on will lead both the company to change processes, considering a digital mindset, not only implementing technology for the sake of technology. So we are really talking about transforming the businesses while doing the same for the people. I think even in technology, Rob, to be honest, it's sometimes scary how much people are a little bit behind in this change curve with technology advancing so much faster. And I will be very happy to help them get into the curve, attach and grow much faster than they have been doing so far.
It seems to be a recurring theme of how technology can multiply so much quicker. While theoretically people could change quicker, there's so many barriers to that.
Technology doesn't change anything. So I mentioned to you, I work with supply chain management for the last 4 or 5 years. 15 years ago, I was working in finance. The kind of technology that we had back there 15 years ago, right? A little bit of robotics, process automation, a little bit of workflows, automation in general, some algorithms, maybe a few dashboarding technology, visualization tools, everything that already existed 15 years ago could have transformed supply chain back then. Now people talk about generative AI. And I would tell you that people are still not even using that technology from that long back. And they hope to make the jump because they are still betting that the technology is going to solve the problems. No, people are going to solve the problems. This is where focus is required. And that's not easy at all. You need to think about their fears. You need to think about their concerns. So you need to think about their personal needs, about upskilling, about risk. It's a complex ecosystem. And if you can do that, then the kind of productivity that you can enable is out of this planet, even with the most simple of the platforms and tools.
There's so much potential in people. Everything in organizations is set up from when we had factories, and there's the hierarchy and then this flow. And people are like, the whole thing of human resources is people are seen as resources. What we almost need to do is change and start from now, and you build around the people. But that's a bigger discussion and one that's not going to change anyway.
I will beg to disagree, Rob. It will change. It may be taking some time. It may be that we don't see it, but it will have to change because the way technology is going, people are going to realize or must realize that the values, the important things are not the things that we have worked the last century. That's the past. And what gives me trust, what gives me a lot of optimism is that what we are living right now is not the first time humanity is going through. We have had these waves, these cycles in the past again. Oh, now it's AI is different. It's more, if you would go back there 200 years ago, the changes for them were as overwhelming as AI is right now. It also looked like the world would collapse, and it didn't. So I think one of the jobs we have, me, you, a lot of highly intelligent people in this platform in LinkedIn, we have as a job is to help people to move through this change and to evolve because we know it's possible.
Which kind of goes back to the whole spiral dynamics that sometimes we have to see the problem. I always look at in terms of technology adoption. We've had the ability for home shopping, home working for about 20 years. And it took COVID for people. There has to be a trigger. And I think what's happening at the moment is systems are breaking down, burnout, all of these things, lack of engagement, all of these situations are creating the conditions for people to change. But they need to have the trigger generally before people change.
And it needs to be real. That's one thing that I talk about often when in the context of change management. Some change management frameworks, they are going to tell you the first thing is to raise awareness of the problem, whatever it is. And what often happens is that people are trying to follow these frameworks. They're doing their very best, but they are not raising a genuine problem. They are not elevating something that deserves the attention of any human being. It's a lot of artificial problems, a lot of artificial needs, and unfortunately, lack of transparency. People are lost a little bit the ability to say the things that they want or they need or how they want to drive because they are afraid of how this is going to look like external stakeholders or whatnot. So some sort of sustainability agenda in place because that's what the market needs. Nobody buys that. So you need to be clear. That's what I want. And this is why I want this. And that's how you're going to drive there because it's true. Because honestly, authentically, that's what you want to do for your business. And I feel like leaders are lacking a little bit that ability. You told the story about, right? So one thing that disappointed me a lot was I was in a meeting after the whole COVID thing was over. And then an executive mentioned that it was time for all of them to realize that the travel for a 2-hour meeting over the Atlantic was not required, that they could do a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, whatever it is. And it just got me thinking, it really required COVID for you to figure out that it's not possible. The technology is there for the last 10 years, man. And you're spending time, companies' time, resources, all sorts of money, investments, blocking other people's agenda, making it harder for everybody because you needed COVID, tell you. We can do better.
Yeah, it's crazy, but I think one of the problems is constant stress, constant just busyness. It's like on a treadmill, just constantly. Yep. And that creates an environment where people can't think. And there's never stopping to think and never stopping to look up. And so it's all kind of craziness, which we all pick apart every day on LinkedIn.
You probably heard that. Everybody should do 20 minutes meditation every day. Very busy people should do 60 minutes.
It's always the people that need it most don't. So we've talked about your growing circle of capacity, skills, concerns, responsibilities. So now I'm looking at where is the comfort zone for you now? What's the challenge? You've overcome so many challenges. You've assimilated and become so much more capable, competent, confident person. What's at the boundary of Eduardo now?
Very good question. I think it definitely has to do with this coaching practice that I am building. That is, again, and glad that we are talking about it because I can openly say it's not a plan for tomorrow. It's not something that I'm doing to get up and running like next week. That's my next 10, 15-year plan. That is a lot that I have built into that plan that I want to happen for me to develop as a coach, as an individual, to reach certain milestones and then extend my impact. But that's definitely boundary for me, the border for me. That's where I feel very uncomfortable, the part of building your own business. I'm grateful to have so many amazing people around me, especially after I started contributing in LinkedIn. I got in contact with so many outstanding entrepreneurs that shared the stories, how they did, how they planned, and etc. But it's definitely the place where I feel most uncomfortable. And that makes me very excited.
I shall be watching your journey for when you make that change. Okay, so last question is, so anyone who might be looking to hire you as a coach or a corporate that's looking for a leader that can solve the kind of problems that you do, where should they reach out to you?
My link page. I have organized in a way that it's very easy to set up some time with me. You have straight there in my profile the Calendly link, and we can quickly get into an hour conversation, 30 minutes conversation, whatever it is. And even with coaching clients, I always tell my clients and other clients, come and spend an hour with me interest-free, because we need to see if it's a match on both sides. And that's how it works for companies as well. That's why we do interviews. So get in touch, go through my profile, go through my Calendly, book some time, and let's talk about it.
Okay, thank you for being so generous with your time. It's been great to understand your journey and to get a sense of who you are, what you do, and where you're going.
I had a feeling it would be fun to do this with you, Rob, and I can say I was right. So for whoever is also watching and thinking, should I get together with Rob in one of the sessions? Go for it.
Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Rob.